Good evening, everyone. Welcome to SCube TV. We have a special guest, Mr. Somir Banerjee from California. He's running for Assembly in California. So, welcome to SCube TV, Mr. Somir Banerjee. How are you today?
Very good. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for inviting me for this interview.
You're welcome. We are happy to have you. So, we'd like to know a little bit more about yourself, your career, and then what made you to run for the office and how you got into politics. I would really appreciate if you can tell us more about your career and what made you to run for the office. Please.
Okay. So my career has been sort of a circuitous path, I suppose. I started off as an engineer and with an ambition to also be a physician, which I then pursued. I've practiced medicine now for about 10 years and have recently begun doing some engineering work again to bring the two together. I've been involved in Republican Party politics for about 8 years or so, more actively going to conventions and learning about the community and starting to get involved in the community. And I was invited to run for office in a district that is largely Democratic. And the hope would be to win it and also to present maybe a more moderate view of the Republican Party than is typically portrayed in the more popular media.
Gotcha. We will. That's nice to say. I mean, it's a very, I would say, not many people will have this combination of engineering and then the physician. And looks like, I mean, more of the nowadays the research work is more going towards the health related solutions. So probably you may be knowing better than me on that. I mean, we will get back to another day on that topic. With your experience and your expertise, we can talk about another show. Now today you're on the politics side, so let us see. Let us know. We want to know more about you and your thoughts and your views on the some of the issues which California I mean, public has. So we'd like to ask you. First thing is your views and thoughts on the COVID-19 in your area and state of California, and how and overall how people have responded and what's happening. I would really appreciate your views and thoughts on that topic, please.
Sir, certainly. Thank you very much. So COVID-19 is a real public health threat, obviously, around the world and certainly in our area. Things were much more slow to start in our area with the infection count in the Monterey County and Santa Cruz County. But things are actually picking up now. So although there's kind of a second wave across most of the country, this is actually true here, but this is more of a bigger wave than the beginning. The infection rate is going up a little more rapidly. So anyway, the county has been very responsive aggressively with implementing quarantine measures for people. And many people are following those. And of course, there are many people who are not following that. Just as an observer, I can say that I've seen many people not wearing their masks appropriately, which I think is tragic. However, there is plenty of signage in the community and plenty of information coming from our public health officers and private health officers too, actually, to communicate to the community to wear a mask and to follow the laws regarding quarantine or closing businesses or when to reopen, like that. I think there are some pilot studies on remdesivir going on in one of our local hospitals, and the hospitals have also been very responsive as much as they could in offering COVID testing. There's also private COVID testing available in the community as well, both the antigen tests and the rapid antigen tests and the PCR tests, as well as I think temporarily we even had a antibody test, which was discontinued.
So, good to hear. I know. I mean, as you said, I mean, the beginning. I mean, initially the overall California first wave. I mean, first lockdown was they were able to blunt the curve, and now things are going up. And recently again, they said they are trying to get some kind of control or handle on the situation. I don't know. I mean, overall, I hope, but hope things will improve. And I'll leave it that topic right there. And yes, uh, during the COVID-19, COVID-19 has exposed a couple of issues. I mean, we have in the American system, one is the healthcare system, which is, I mean, cost of healthcare is very high, and health insurance especially is very high, and also the facilities and this is also not that great. And another thing is the economy. We'll come to the economy in a few minutes, but healthcare is another burning topic in the US. Even before COVID-19, healthcare issue, it was an issue, and COVID-19 has exposed it a little more. So what are your views and thoughts on healthcare? And if you are elected to the office, what would you like to bring to the table to help? I know you cannot change it yourself, but I mean, you work with the other people and also, but what would you like to see, or how would you like to see help people in reducing the cost of the healthcare for them?
I wish I could just change it all to what I think is the right thing. Unfortunately, like you said, I have to accommodate other people's opinions, who unfortunately probably don't know as much as many physicians and healthcare people know about what's going on in healthcare. So I really appreciate you asking this question. What I would like to encourage our state assembly to consider is a revamp of the Medi-Cal system. To quickly sidetrack from that, the larger healthcare economy is largely influenced by the presence of government available and government subsidized healthcare, and obviously controlled largely by the insurance companies and their agreements with each other and their consumers as to what the appropriate rates should be. That's a question that's beyond my scope of understanding and ability to influence. However, and in the state, as a government body, the scope of influence would be Medi-Cal. Medi-Cal is the Medicaid version of healthcare for California, and it plays a huge role in providing care for those who are of lesser means, who can't afford private insurance. Or who don't fall into the age category or other requirements for getting Medicare. Medi-Cal is not being administered as efficiently as it could. They have payments to doctors. Unfortunately, their payments are very low compared to Medicare even, and certainly compared to the private insurances. And actually more significant even than their lower payment is the fact that they delay payment, unfortunately, quite often through their own processes, not through some malicious intent, but just by the nature of how it is administered. So there is no need for like a malicious finger pointing in the case of Medi-Cal. It just needs a healthy revision to catch it up to the technological innovations that are available that could help speed it up and make it a more viable option for those who really need it.
Gotcha. That's, I mean, being in that industry and then in the service, so you know better than at least me and a few other people. So I leave it your opinions to the audience, and then I will go back to another topic, is the economy. And the COVID-19 also exposed. I mean, the economy especially stressed on the put a lot of stress on the small businesses. And before even COVID-19, there is another topic, another issue with the economy in California is because of the regulations and the taxes. Many companies are moving out to the Republican state just to tell you you're a Republican candidate. So, like to tell you, I mean, most of the being going to the Texas or Arizona and then Colorado and those kind of states. So, and then also the another thing is the cost of living is also very high. And so, what are your thoughts on this? And if you are elected, what would you like to propose to change the situation? I mean, especially helping the small businesses which are suffering right now, and the big corporations to stay back. So we'd like to hear more from you on the topic, please.
Sure. I think many economies follow a pattern of struggle and then affluence and then finally bloating and stiffness before they need more dramatic revision. Am I still there?
Yeah, yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, fine. So anyway, I think California is on the latter side of the economic evolutionary cycle, if you will. And if it doesn't correct itself intentionally by itself, then the economy itself will slowly collapse and correct itself that way. And as you stated, many businessmen are leaving the area, including big tech companies are beginning to relocate to other places. And that has been the real sort of boon to at least the face of the California economy, if not, a definite, significant actual portion of the economy. And so as that leaves, that will cause a natural recorrection of the natural cycle of any economy. However, wouldn't it be nice if we could maybe arrest that beforehand and maybe more gently correct the economy through some relaxation of some of the regulations and excessive taxes, which would of course require a more perhaps austere version of the budget. I'm a fiscal conservative, so of course I'm going to be voting to pare down the budget significantly on things that I don't think are within the scope of what the California government should be providing, first off, and second, those things which maybe we would like, but we have to accept that we can't afford temporarily.
Gotcha. That's and another thing is, I mean, the cost of living is very high. I mean, especially the state tax, and then the housing, let it be a own house or a rent. I mean, it's kind of, I mean, it's very high. And people say, when I talk to the people, they say because of a lot of regulations and and giving the approval to construction companies is very stringent. So that is kind of takes long time. Long time is money. And so I mean, that's the reason that the cost is going up. Not many people are able to afford, and so people prefer to move out of California and try to even have a pay cut. Still, they're happy to have a pay cut and move out of California. So with these kind of things, so sorry, we'd like to hear from you your thoughts on how to retain them back in California.
Absolutely, you've hit on one really very simple point, and that is that actually affects quite a few things. If we can reduce some of the regulations and create tax incentives for construction, then we create an environment that follows the typical economic concept of supply and demand, where if we increase the supply of housing, then we lower the overall cost of the housing. That solves a lot of problems. That, of course, lowers the overall standard of living, enabling people to stay here in general. But then it also addresses a problem that people a lot of times don't want to talk about, and that's homelessness. Without adequate supply of decent, lower cost housing, then of course many people can't stay in a home, and they will live on the street or have to wander off to a new state where they could perhaps find a house. If they're able to, once they reach that sort of economic level, it becomes very difficult for them to move as well. So, and what a lot of people don't really realize, a lot of affluent people don't realize, is that homelessness is, not necessarily, like a choice for some people. The vast majority of people that are homeless are there as a result of no fault of their own, through loss of their home, through some unexpected economic disaster. And quite often that's a medical disaster. So these two are tied together quite closely. Medical bills associated with some medical event in a person's life, and then loss of economic resources resulting in becoming homeless. It's a terrible tragedy, and the solutions actually are not terribly complicated. It's, like you said, if we lower regulation, if we provide a means for facilitating more housing, and not just more housing of, like, say, low quality. The California system has a lot of checks in place for inspections and making sure that homes are built according to standards. And I think those standards don't have to be relaxed with regulations. The problem actually lies in the taxation structure for housing. And it would be simple enough as just one example to provide tax incentives to build more vertical housing in the higher population areas. There's no reason why we can't allow higher buildings in places like San Jose and the edge of my district in Santa Clara to allow people to live closer to their workplace, especially the tech workforce.
Gotcha. That's a fair. I mean, as you brought in the homelessness, I mean, that I know the California, especially San Francisco and the LA, these are the two areas where you have maximum homeless people. What I heard or what I learned, I mean, talking to other people, they said, I mean, many people from other states are also moving, homeless people from other states are also moving to San Francisco and LA because of the services the government is providing or because of the weather. First thing is the weather.
Yeah.
Weather is one thing so that they can stay out, I mean, in the open places. And that's the one. Yeah, and also mental health is another topic which many people said. I mean, these two are contributing in the economy, mental health, and then the weather is contributing to more number of people moving to SFO and LA. So you want to please add on to whatever you were saying earlier. Please, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, a significant portion, I said, of homelessness is a result of economic disaster, unexpected, that people are unable to prepare for even. And those persons are not moving very much. They're not going from state to state for better weather. They're usually kind of stuck in one area. That's like families, entire families that become homeless. People don't see those families on the street very often because there's a great deal of shame associated with it. So they're not out there on the street corners and making themselves public and trying to collect money and survive. It doesn't work that way. People in the general population of people that see homelessness, they associate it with the guy on the street corner. And that's actually not a real good example of homelessness. As you mentioned as well, there's mental health. So a lot of homelessness is related to poor mental health management. There's some obvious diagnoses. I mean, as a physician, I can get into it in detail, but the point is that we need to provide better access to the care that's actually already available through FQHCs and other Medi-Cal related practices that are willing and ready to provide that care if people knew that the care was available, if people had better availability of appointments. Unfortunately, there is, obviously I think probably a not enough supply of medical care to meet the demand that's probably out there. And so again, we go back to readdressing how Medi-Cal is delivered to make sure that those people get the care they need. If we could address mental health, then that really addresses the core problem that many homeless persons are facing, whether it be full schizophrenia that completely, disables them from being able to function in society in a productive way and care for themselves appropriately, to much lesser intense but equally damaging diagnoses like depression and anxiety, which again, that's actually forming a negative synergy where you have a family that, maybe the breadwinners suffer from some depression, anxiety, they're unable to meet enough of their demands, then there's economic tragedy, then the depression and anxiety becomes significantly worse, and they're not even able to step forward to figure out how to help themselves and their family. So at a bare minimum, we need to address these things, which are actually pretty easy to address, even from a public health perspective.
Thank you very much for your inputs on that. Going back to the economy and one more point, I mean, many companies, I mean, in the tech companies, they recently announced, I mean, Stripe announced that if you want to move out of the big cities, we'll give you a bonus of $20,000. And also another topic is the Lyft, companies like Uber and Lyft, especially Lyft, I mean, kind of announced a few days back. I mean, they said they did not want, but they said, I mean, if they don't give the independent working 1099 kind of status to some people who are willing to work as a 1099 people, especially for their drivers, I mean, they would like to stop services in the California. And another what I heard is some of the other services like event managers, small business people, especially in Southern California, where they do events. Those people are also suffering because of this particular class. I mean, of treating them as W-2. And so with these things, so what are your thoughts on this particular class? Do they need to refine, or do they need to repeal, or change it? I mean, so what are your thoughts on this particular class which has come in place? And then I really appreciate your views on this, please.
Thank you. AB 5 needs to be repealed. When any law has perhaps more exceptions to its implementation than it actually affects, then maybe the law doesn't need to be there. Maybe the law needs to be rewritten in a way to address the actual problems that occur. I think AB 5 in its spirit was intended to protect gig workers from being manipulated by companies into not being able to experience the same benefits as full employees. However, it was exceedingly short-sighted in before it was discussed, because it didn't think about the huge implications for the gig economy. I mean, our society has changed as a result of economic changes over the past couple of decades, and the gig economy has grown in enormous ways, and people have adapted to that. And so AB 5 comes in and tries to destroy people's adaptation to a difficult economy. It's idiotic, unfortunately. So anyway, there are so many exceptions to AB 5, myself included. Doctors are excluded. So there's no point in having a law that requires exclusions so often. And if any particular economic group can band together sufficiently, they can get an exception. So you can't say that the judiciary is not accommodating the exceptions. They are, but it's a pointless process to then require small business, if you will, to add on extra burden to themselves to try to maintain their employment. And also then to create burdens for the larger businesses that employ them to have extra burden that neither party really is interested in, just so they can practice business.
Okay. I mean, thanks.
Yeah, repeal AB 5. Very simple. Repeal AB 5. Solve the problem.
Gotcha. Yeah, the very nice. Yeah, I mean, I'll leave it there, the topic. So I know we can discuss more on that one, but I don't want to get. Yeah, we got your views on that. Thank you very much. And coming back to the education, I mean, which is mainly a primary thing for many people to come out of the poverty. I mean, people always say that if your education is the one tool which can help anybody to be on their own and enrich themselves and grow up in their life. So but at the same time, California is a rich state, and if you consider as one separate country, it will be like 6th largest economy in the world or 5th largest economy. I don't know the exact number. Sorry about that. No, but at least it is among the one of those two. And also you have a world capital for the tech industry and also the entertainment industry, and you have a lot of money. In spite of that, I mean, California is in the number 20 in K-12, and not many schools are complaining that the funding is low and the education system is not that great. So I would really appreciate your views and thoughts on how we can, what can be done to improve the education in California, state of California.
Yes, I agree. Of course, that's kind of a cultural thing. Education is the most important in any society to bring up people to the level that they desire. It's what holds society together, as well as the spiritual element. So we need to focus on education for the long haul for our state to reflect what it is viewed as across the world. Clearly, when you have a number like 20th in education with 5th GDP in the world, those are mismatched concepts. We should be number 1 or maybe number 5, right, in the world, but we're not. So my idea is perhaps a very old one, and that is let's not focus on small incremental measures of the California educational system. because they've all failed, as evidenced by the current racial crisis and really class crisis that is occurring. Those are problems that are related to education over the long haul. Let's focus on fixing the education. And the way that I believe to fix that is to revamp the education system into a smaller unit of education. So large schools that cover large areas have not served the community as well. Smaller schools will have a larger amount of accountability of the teachers to the parents and the parents to the teachers. That accountability is what creates change in any society, any community, and any person. And so having a small school would actually organically create that accountability, and that in and of itself would create a huge solution to a big problem. Of course, unfortunately, that's a very long-term solution to emergent problems.
You got a very, very good point there. I mean, small schools and the involvement of both the teachers and the parents, and the accountability of both parents and teachers, which is a nice thing. I mean, whenever I talk to many other, when I searched on Google about how come in Finland, other countries were successful, they said, I mean, the parents' involvement is the key. Number one, primary important parents' involvement. We totally got it. I mean, but when I talk to other people about on the same topic, they say some of the underprivileged areas where they are not, the schools are not doing well. And first thing is the funding is low, and again the parents' involvement is low because I mean most of the parents are either working two jobs or three jobs, and they're struggling to make their both ends meet. With all these kind of things, I mean it will be very hard for them to focus on the kids' education. So those are the challenges they have. That's the community which needs more help in enriching themselves and their kids on the education side. So what is, I know, I mean, so you're not the only one, I mean, who can change everything, but I mean, again, it's not the responsibility of one person, but I mean, we are only trying to do the brainstorming. Any thoughts on that, on how to improve that particular group's needs? Sorry.
That's a great question. So that actually touches on more of a macroeconomic issue. The fact that families require two adults working to survive or to progress out of their socioeconomic class is not a good thing. With a country that has such abundant resources and such a large economy, it doesn't make as much sense that we should have a situation where people in the lowest socioeconomic class must have both parents working in order to pull themselves out of the class. So that's a macroeconomic question, and I believe that that's a result of poor trade policies over the past few decades. That's a federal answer to that problem, and I would love to be part of that. However, that's not within the scope of my assembly district at this moment, as far as I can tell. In the short term, though, to address that problem of not having adequate childcare and not being able to interact with teachers as much or involved in children's education as much, I think, again, actually, having a smaller social environment with more accountability will present itself with solutions. When people get to know each other in a school and that becomes a center of their community, then they're more willing to help each other. And I have to add, as a side note, it's interesting how that is actually evolving right now with COVID, because COVID has caused people to adapt by trying to stay away from each other. Schools are opening up in smaller groups. And as a result of smaller groups, people are getting to know each other a little bit better and are reaching out to each other to help each other. There's an enormous amount of resource in the social part of humanity. So it's actually, it sounds like a sort of a cop-out to say, well, there's nothing to do. But in fact, there is a lot to do, and it will get done by simply creating an environment where people can help each other.
Very nice. And you brought in a very good another point, I mean, related to the schools. I mean, being a physician, I would like to ask you this question. I mean, is it okay to open the schools and have the in-person education right now rather than the online education? Is it safe? I mean, it's purely health and education kind of a question. So usually I don't ask this question to anyone, but because you being a physician, I'm asking you that question. Sorry.
Yeah, so of course I defer always to the local public health officer because those persons are in charge of their community. That said, um, it's a difficult question that has to have a balance between the economic impact and the social impact, and of course the health impact of opening up the school. I think in communities that can tolerate the risk and have the ability to handle the risk, then they should open up to the extent that they feel comfortable and try to reestablish their economy and their social structure. That social structure, I have to tell you, is falling apart as a result of the isolation and causing a social and emotional impact on people that is utterly devastating. So we need to address that. The real tragedy then is that we don't have a way at this moment to mitigate the risk of COVID besides the physical means of mask and separation. It would be wonderful if we had a medication that the government would approve that would provide us a prophylaxis against COVID. Unfortunately, no medication has been approved by our government to do that. That said, we wait for a vaccine and we wait for a antiviral. So to comment on that in regards to like a compare and contrast to help people understand, let's compare COVID to the flu. Now, many people die from the flu every year, and it causes very many horrible complications for both the two major at-risk group, which are the immunocompromised and which includes the elderly and the very young. And that's a risk that we face every year. So in a sense, you could say that COVID is not significantly different than the flu, and perhaps we should think about it that way. But what people don't realize is that with the flu, we have antivirals that work very well, and we have a vaccine that protects us from major complications if we're at risk, and we don't have that for COVID. So on the one hand, we're kind of waiting for those things to arrive so that we can safely just reopen. And on the other hand, it certainly would be nice if we had some other medication that would help us prevent getting terribly sick in the first place.
Thank you very much for your views and thoughts on that. And at the same time, during this COVID-19, and you have another social issue which has spread from many places and spread all over other different parts of the country and the states. So Black Lives Matter, and along with them, you have a couple of other things too, like riots and then the police reforms. So your views and thoughts on the moment and then the associated issues like riots and then the police reforms. These are the three things I think they kind of come as a package. So I really appreciate your views and thoughts on that, please.
Absolutely. Again, to go back to what I'd said earlier, I think the whole issue of racial conflict and class conflict arises out of inappropriately administered education, and then the resulting inability of people to dialogue with each other to resolve their conflict. And also the larger economic problem, which is the loss of upward mobility for the lower economic class to get back into the middle class and then forward from there, or to even feel comfortable in the middle class. That middle class has been shrinking for the past 20 or 30 years or more, actually, and is at it depends on how you define it, but the point is that it is shrinking, and that's a large portion of our problem as well, from a sort of large demographic perspective. So Black Lives Matter is a standard-bearing movement to bring us into focus to realize that we need to address the class differences that are occurring in our society that are a result of poor trade policies and poorly administered education. Number one.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thanks for your views on that particular thing. And so so you're you're mentioning that this particular issue and the moment is the root cause of the not having a proper education system, and then the trade policies which are affecting the salaries of the people. I got your views. Thank you very much on that. And coming back to another thing is in US, especially safety point of view and the Second Amendment, and many people like the Second Amendment, and Republicans also support the Second Amendment. But and also we have another issue like as we discussed earlier, the mental health and the safety of the people in the countries. How do we balance? I mean, between the Second Amendment and the safety of the people.
Okay, yeah, there's a couple different ways to look at that, and they should both be addressed. So one view is the larger socio-political standpoint of the essence of the Second Amendment, being the right to bear arms, to form a militia for the public defense. This was written into our Constitution to protect us from an overbearing government. Other people might have different opinions on that, saying, well, it wasn't written with the idea of people having, automatic weapons or nuclear bombs and tanks and all these different things. And sure, they didn't have all that stuff back then, but it certainly wasn't put in the Constitution to allow people to hunt. The Second Amendment was written to protect people from the government. The government, at the time of the writing of our Constitution, was forced quartering soldiers in people's homes, taking their belongings, and committing many atrocities against people's will, and that needed to stop. If people want to argue that point, saying, those times are done, they're not done. Let's take a look at Iran. Let's take a look at Cambodia. Let's take a look at Germany. Now, there's many examples in the past 100 years that can show us how when you disarm a people, it results quite often with a nefarious government taking into place, them taking advantage of that and then causing a lot of harm to the people. That's the purpose of the Second Amendment. That said, unfortunately, our society is losing some of its maturity in ability to understand that and to value that, to be able to take advantage of that. If we are shooting each other, then we have perhaps forgotten what the guns are for. They're for protecting us and for hunting. They're not for shooting each other. And if you look back in the past 100 years, this has been a slow progression where guns were not considered a threat many years ago. Many people had them. There's even stories you can find of children, what we would call children now, but not children then, taking their guns with them to school. And that wasn't a big deal. Those smaller communities, used their guns for hunting and hunting season. And there was a lot of maturity associated with the possession of a weapon. Unfortunately, our urban centers and suburban areas are often losing that maturity and understanding in the use of guns, and the guns presence is being abused for horrible purposes. I don't know the solution because to me, the Second Amendment is a critical part of the maintenance of our republic. At the same time, it's obvious that we are slowly becoming unable to handle them.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for your views and thoughts on that. So any other topic? I mean, I missed it. I mean, other than the climate, there's another thing is climate. When we're talking about California, we cannot end the conversation without talking about the environment, and especially with a couple of wildfires going on both in the north and the south side. So do you want to say anything on your views on what kind of proposals would you like to bring to the table if you are elected to the office to help the environment in the California especially?
Yeah, so a large portion of the California fires are a result of our mismanagement of our environment, in the sense of not preventing the fires. The fires themselves are producing far more carbon emissions than any adjustment of industry could ever compare to. So I think the emphasis should not be on regulating businesses so much to reduce their carbon emissions, but the emphasis should be placed, in particular in California, on actually managing our environment to prevent the actual fires. Number one, that would be a very efficient use of our funds. Number two, to go back to the climate change that's occurring, there are many different viewpoints. Some people are, convinced that the climate change isn't occurring, and of course, most scientists agree that climate change is occurring. So then there's an argument that what is the cause of the climate change? Is it human? Is it a natural progress or a cycle of the Earth? And I think that discussion is still open for debate. That said, it really doesn't matter. I think we all want our backyard to look nice. And we want to look out beyond our backyard and also see that it's very beautiful. Especially here in the Monterey Peninsula Bay Area, we love to look out at our beautiful nature. And so you don't have to motivate people based on some climate change problem to look after their backyard. And we can do that if we address one of the most important issues for humanity as a whole. And that is, how do we generate energy for our society? How do we generate energy at a cheap price? And that may seem unconnected, but is actually the core issue of keeping our environment clean. If we can produce energy in a clean way that doesn't have an impact on our environment in the immediate visual sense, in the long-term climate sense, and it does not defer management of the climate or the environment to the future or to other locations, then we need to do that. We need to come up with ways to produce energy that are safe and don't produce pollution. And in fact, we have those means at our disposal. Unfortunately, they're not emphasized. They're not used. So let me go through the list. I used to be an energy engineer, and I can go through the list with you very quickly and efficiently. So obviously, coal produces a lot of pollution. So we don't like it because it makes a lot of ugly pollution and in fact produces carbon, and people feel the carbon affects the climate. So we don't want to use coal continually. It's also a limited resource with a definable end perhaps. So that's out. So then people say, okay, well, let's choose cleaner energies like wind and solar. Unfortunately, wind and solar are only surviving due to government subsidies, number one. Number two, they provide a very insignificant portion of the overall energy economy at this time. And they are unlikely to be able to be expanded in the near or even the long term into producing a significant amount of energy. Furthermore, wind and solar, in particular, kick the bucket or kick the can both to the future for our environmental management, and they kick the can to other countries, in particular China. So the rare earth magnets that are necessary for wind power and the rare earth minerals that are required to produce solar are largely mined, and the solar panels and the motors are often produced in China at great cost to the Chinese environment. Now, one might say, well, who cares? It's China, and we should look after ourselves. But that is exceedingly short-sighted and may, in fact, be perhaps related to our conflict with China at this moment. So we need to respect that. We need to not emphasize wind and solar so much as larger producers of energy for our overall energy economy, but keep them on board as small, focused uses for energy in the niches that they provide. So then the next topic would be, of course, nuclear power. And if we want to divide nuclear power into fission-type power and fusion-type power, fusion is always 10 years away. There's really no point in getting excited about fusion power. Maybe it'll come someday, maybe not. Who cares? Fission power is where we have technology that works today. Now, of course, you say then, oh, we have 3 Mile Island, we have Chernobyl, we have Fukushima. there are other accidents that have occurred that cause massive tragedies. And that's largely because of a focus early on in the power industry on the existing technology of enhanced uranium to produce nuclear power. Thorium nuclear reactors are finally getting some research and have some potential, real potential, if they're developed adequately, to produce very safe form of nuclear power. And I think to summarize all that, we should pour all the climate change money, all the social concern about the environment on producing too much carbon. Instead of creating regulations and forcing people to adapt their business models, I think we should take all that money and simply pour it into thorium research and wildlife conservation.
Good. Thank you very much for your views and insights into the energy sector. Energy, alternative energies. So thank you very much on that. So one last point is, why? Please tell us, why should your constituents should vote for you?
Our community desperately needs a new opinion.
Okay.
It depends on who you talk to about what our community needs, but I'm going to summarize it real simple. Like, if you do the same thing and vote for the same people, the same kinds of people over and over again, then you shouldn't be upset when you get absolutely no real change in what's happening. So you should vote for me because I actually have an educated opinion on the matters at hand and can provide real solutions. And surprisingly, I'm in touch with my community and know what they really want because I've been taking care of them for 10 years.
Very nice. Thank you very much for that. And taking care of servicing your community. So if somebody would like to be part of your campaign, would like to be involved in your campaign and know more about you and your campaign, where can they reach you?
Thank you. You can go to SB4, the number 4, assembly.org.
Okay, perfect. Do you want to say anything else, or any other topic which I missed, or any final words?
No, you are very kind to interview me. I really appreciate that. And thank you for giving me all this opportunity. And I think we covered a lot of topics. Anytime you wanted to ask me any other questions, I'd be happy to provide those answers.
Thank you very much for coming on to the show, Mr. Shomir Banerjee, and we wish you all the best in the run and good luck. Have a nice rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Good night.
Thank you, sir. Good night.